She had always been the kind of person people forgot to notice. Not because she did anything wrong, and not because she didn't belong, but because she never tried to stand out. In a room full of voices, she was the quiet pause between conversations. In a crowd full of movement, she was the stillness no one paid attention to. She lived her life gently, almost carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb the world around her. At school, she sat near the back, not hiding, but not placing herself in the center either. She listened more than she spoke. When teachers asked questions, she usually knew the answers, but her hand stayed down. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something softer, like she didn't feel the need to compete for attention. Most people assumed things about her without ever asking. They thought she was shy, or unsure of herself, or maybe just average. He was one of those people. He noticed her, but only in passing. To him, she was just someone who existed in the same space. Someone quiet. Someone who didn't leave an impression. Someone easy to overlook. He was the opposite. Confident, loud when needed, and comfortable being seen. People listened when he spoke. He had a way of filling a room without trying too hard. He believed that if you had something valuable, you showed it. You didn't sit quietly and wait for someone to discover it. So in his mind, her silence meant one thing. She had nothing to show. Sometimes, during group work or class discussions, he would speak over her without realizing it. Or maybe he did realize but didn't think it mattered. If she had something important to say, she would have said it louder. That's what he believed. And she never corrected him. She didn't argue. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to prove him wrong. She simply stayed the same, calm, quiet, present. But there was something about her that didn't match the assumptions people made. If someone paid close attention, really close, they would notice small things. The way her fingers moved gently across surfaces, as if feeling patterns no one else could see. The way she sometimes drifted into her own thoughts, her eyes focused on something far beyond the room. The way she listened to sounds, real sounds, with a kind of depth that others missed completely. It was like she lived in a different rhythm. But most people weren't paying that much attention. He definitely wasn't. To him, life was simple. People who were good at something made it obvious. They spoke up, stepped forward, showed confidence. That was how the world worked. So whenever her name came up, he had already decided who she was. Just someone quiet. Just someone ordinary. Nothing more. There were moments, though small ones, that didn't quite fit into his picture of her. Once, during a break, someone was playing music softly in the background. It was just noise to most people, something to fill the silence. But she had paused completely. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that made people look at her. Just paused. Her head tilted slightly, her expression soft, as if she was hearing something deeper than everyone else. He noticed it for a second. Then he looked away. It didn't seem important. Another time, during a casual conversation, someone mentioned music again. Different people started talking about songs they liked, artists they followed, concerts they wanted to attend. When it was her turn, she simply smiled and said, "I like listening." That was it. No long explanation. No effort to impress. He almost laughed. Of course she liked listening. That was all she ever did. He didn't mean to be unkind. In his mind, he was just being realistic. People were who they showed themselves to be, and she showed very little. So he stopped thinking about her altogether. Days passed. Weeks passed. Life moved forward in its usual way. Classes, conversations, small moments that came and went without much meaning. She remained the same, quiet, steady, unnoticed, but her world was not empty. When she was alone, everything changed. In those quiet moments, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't overlooked. She wasn't just someone in the background. She became someone else entirely. Her small room held something that no one at school had ever seen. Tucked carefully against the wall was a piano. Not new, not perfect, but deeply loved. It was the one place where she didn't hold back. When she sat down in front of it, her posture changed. Her breathing changed. Even the way she looked at the keys carried a quiet kind of confidence. Her fingers, which seemed so still and unremarkable during the day, came alive. She didn't play for attention. She didn't play to impress anyone. She played because it was the only place where she could fully express what she felt without needing words. Every note carried something real. Memories, emotions, thoughts she never spoke out loud. Sometimes the music was soft and slow, like a quiet conversation. Other times it was powerful, almost overwhelming, like emotions she had kept inside for too long. Hours would pass without her noticing. In that space, she wasn't invisible. She was everything. But no one knew. Not her classmates. Not the people who passed by her every day. And certainly not him. To them, she was still just the quiet girl in the background. And to him, she was still someone he had already figured out. There was no reason to think otherwise. After all, people didn't usually hide something extraordinary so well. At least, that's what he believed. One afternoon, there was a small group discussion in class. Nothing serious, just a casual activity where everyone had to share their thoughts. He spoke as usual with confidence. His ideas were clear, his voice steady. People nodded. Some agreed. Some added to what he said. When it was her turn, there was a short pause. Everyone looked at her, waiting. She hesitated for just a moment. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, but not weak. Calm, but not uncertain. What she said wasn't long, but it was thoughtful, more thoughtful than most of what had been said before. For a second, the group went quiet. It wasn't dramatic. No one reacted strongly. But something shifted just slightly. He noticed it. He didn't expect her to say something like that. It didn't match the image he had of her. Still, the moment passed quickly. Someone else started talking. The conversation moved on. And just like that, everything returned to normal. Or at least it seemed that way. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small question had formed. Had he misjudged her? He didn't think about it for long. It was easier to stick with what he already believed. People didn't change overnight. And one small moment didn't mean much. So he let the thought go. She, on the other hand, didn't think about him at all. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She wasn't waiting for someone to notice her. She was simply living her life in the way that felt natural to her. Quiet on the outside, full of depth on the inside, and completely unaware that one day, everything would change. That the same people who overlooked her would soon be the ones watching in silence. That the same person who underestimated her would be the one left without words. For now, though, none of that had happened yet. For now, she was still the quiet girl no one really noticed. And he was still the one who believed he had already figured her out. Neither of them knew what was coming. But something was slowly building beneath the surface. Something no one could see yet. Something that would soon be impossible to ignore. He didn't think of himself as a bad person. In fact, if someone had asked him, he would have said he was fair, honest, and straightforward. He believed in effort, confidence, and showing what you were capable of. To him, the world rewarded those who stepped forward, not those who stayed in the background. That belief shaped the way he saw people. And it shaped the way he treated her. It wasn't obvious at first. He never openly insulted her. He never said anything harsh enough for others to call him out. But in small, quiet ways his attitude showed. It was in the way he barely looked at her when she spoke. In the way he would quickly move the conversation along, as if her words didn't need time or attention. In the way he assumed she wouldn't contribute much, even before giving her a chance. These were small things, easy to miss, easy to ignore, but they added up. During group work, he naturally took the lead. People followed him because he spoke clearly and made decisions quickly. Felt efficient. Felt right. And she simply went along with it. Not because she didn't have ideas, but because she didn't push to be heard. One afternoon, they were placed in the same group again. The task wasn't difficult, but it required everyone to share input. He started speaking immediately, laying out a plan. Others nodded, agreeing without much discussion. She listened quietly as usual. After a moment, she gently said, "Maybe we could try a different way." Her voice was calm, not challenging, just offering. He paused for a second, then gave a small shrug. "We're already doing fine," he replied. "No need to complicate it." It wasn't rude. not in tone, but it closed the door. She nodded slightly and said nothing more. The group moved on. To him, it was a normal interaction. Quick, simple, efficient. To her, it was just another moment where her voice didn't quite matter. But she didn't take it personally. That was the strange part. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel hurt in the way others might expect. She had gotten used to it. Not in a sad way, but in a quiet understanding of how people worked. She knew that people like him valued what they could see clearly. Confidence, volume, presence. She simply didn't express herself that way, and she had never felt the need to change that. Still, there were moments when his attitude became more noticeable. Like the time someone asked if anyone in the group had a special skill or talent. It was meant to be a light conversation, something fun to break the routine. People started sharing things, sports, art, public speaking, different hobbies. When the question reached her, she hesitated. Not because she didn't have an answer, but because she wasn't sure if it needed to be said. Before she could respond, he spoke. "She probably just likes staying quiet," he said with a small laugh. A couple of people smiled. Not in a mean way, just following the moment. Passed quickly. But for a brief second, the room had already decided something about her. She didn't correct him. She simply smiled. The same soft, calm smile she always had. "Something like that," she said. And the conversation moved on. He didn't think twice about it. To him, it was just a joke. A simple comment. Nothing serious. He didn't notice the way she had paused before answering. He didn't notice the fact that she had chosen not to say more. He didn't notice a lot of things, because he wasn't looking for them. Days continued in the same pattern. He spoke. Others listened. She listened. Others barely noticed. And yet, something about her remained steady. She didn't shrink. She didn't try to become louder just to fit in. She didn't change who she was to match what others expected. Instead, she stayed exactly the same. Calm, observant, quietly present. There was a kind of strength in that, but it wasn't the kind he recognized. To him, strength was visible. It was clear, bold, undeniable. Hers was hidden, and hidden things were easy to underestimate. One day, there was a small disagreement in class. Nothing serious, just different opinions on how something should be done. Voices overlapped. People tried to make their points heard. He was right in the middle of it, speaking with confidence, explaining his view. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke again. Not loudly, but clearly. Her words were simple, but they carried a quiet logic that made people pause. For a moment, the room settled. A few people nodded. Even he stopped talking. It wasn't what he expected. He looked at her, really looked this time, not just as the quiet girl in the background, but as someone who had just said something worth hearing. But the moment didn't last long. Someone else jumped in. The discussion picked up again. And just like that, the attention shifted away from her. He leaned back slightly, thinking. There was something about her that didn't fully match the image he had created. But instead of questioning his assumption, he adjusted it slightly. Maybe she had a few good thoughts. But that didn't change much. In his mind, truly talented people didn't stay hidden. They didn't wait quietly. They showed up, again and again, until no one could ignore them. And she wasn't doing that. So he returned to his original belief. She was still ordinary. Meanwhile, her life outside of all this remained untouched by these opinions. Every day, after everything else was done, she returned to the one place where she didn't have to be misunderstood. The piano. There, no one interrupted her. No one spoke over her. No one assumed anything about her. The music spoke for her. And it said everything she never said out loud. Sometimes, she played softly, letting each note fade slowly into silence. Other times, her hands moved faster, stronger, filling the room with energy that no one at school had ever seen from her. If anyone had watched her in those moments, they wouldn't have recognized her. Not because she looked different, but because she felt different. Alive in a way that didn't need approval. Confident in a way that didn't need to be loud. But that part of her life remained private. Hidden from the world that had already decided who she was. Back at school, nothing seemed to change. He continued being himself, confident, expressive, sure of his place. And she continued being herself, quiet, thoughtful, unnoticed, until one small moment began to shift things again. There was an announcement. A formal event was coming up. Something bigger than the usual school activities. It would involve performances, presentations, and selected participants. People were excited. Names would be chosen. Opportunities would be given. He immediately showed interest. Of course he did. This was the kind of situation where people like him thrived. A stage. An audience. A chance to be seen. He couldn't imagine her being part of something like that. It didn't fit. In his mind, she belonged in the background, not on a stage. But he didn't say that out loud. He didn't need to, because as far as he was concerned, it was obvious. Or at least, it seemed obvious. What he didn't realize was that some stories don't reveal themselves slowly in front of everyone. Some stay hidden until the exact right moment. And when they do appear, they change everything all at once. He wasn't ready for that. Not yet. For now, he still believed he understood her. Still believed there was nothing more to see. Still believed that quiet meant ordinary. And that belief was about to be tested in a way he never expected. The announcement changed the energy of the whole place. It wasn't just another small activity or class task. This time it felt important. There would be a formal event, something organized, something people would remember. Teachers talked about it with excitement. Students started discussing it in groups, guessing what it would be like, who would be chosen, and what kind of performances there would be. It didn't take long for the atmosphere to shift. People who usually stayed relaxed now seemed more alert. Some started preparing early, thinking about how they could stand out. Others simply waited, hoping their names would appear. He didn't wait. The moment he heard about it, he was already planning. In his mind, this was the perfect opportunity. A stage, an audience, attention, all the things he was comfortable with. He imagined himself standing there, speaking confidently, maybe even performing something that would leave an impression. He had done it before in smaller ways, and it always worked. People noticed him. They listened. This would be no different. Or at least that's what he believed. Meanwhile, she reacted differently. When she first heard the announcement, she didn't rush into discussions or make any visible plans. She simply listened, just like she always did. But something inside her shifted. Not in a loud or obvious way, just a quiet awareness. She didn't tell anyone, but she had been waiting for something like this. Not for attention, not for recognition, but for a chance. A real one. Still, from the outside, nothing about her changed. She didn't suddenly become more talkative. She didn't try to stand out or join conversations about the event. She stayed the same. And because of that, no one expected anything from her. Days passed and the selection process began. Teachers reviewed names, discussed options, and slowly started finalizing who would participate. Students kept guessing, sometimes confidently, sometimes nervously. His name came up often in conversations. Of course he'll be chosen. He's perfect for this. He knows how to handle a stage. He heard these comments and they only strengthened his confidence. He didn't doubt it. In his mind, he already belonged there. Her name, on the other hand, wasn't part of those conversations. No one mentioned her. No one guessed she might be included. She didn't fit the image people had of performers. She wasn't loud, wasn't expressive in public, didn't show any obvious signs of talent. So naturally, people overlooked her. Even him. Especially him. Then the list was finally posted. A simple sheet placed where everyone could see it. Students gathered around, reading quickly, searching for their names or their friends. He walked over with confidence, expecting to find his name somewhere near the top. And it was there, exactly where he thought it would be. He smiled slightly, not surprised, just satisfied. This was expected. This was normal. Then his eyes moved further down the list. Not because he was searching for anything specific, just scanning out of habit. And that's when he saw it. Her name. For a moment he thought he had read it wrong. He leaned in slightly, reading again. It was there. Clear. Unmistakable. Her name. Right there among the selected participants. He stepped back, confused. It didn't make sense. Around him, others started noticing too. Wait, her. Are you serious? How did that happen? The reactions weren't harsh, but they were filled with surprise. No one had expected this. He felt the same. He tried to process it logically. Maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe she signed up and no one noticed. Maybe the teachers were giving chances to people who hadn't participated before. That had to be it. Because otherwise, it didn't add up. He looked around trying to find her. She wasn't near the list. She wasn't reacting like the others. No excitement. No nervous laughter. No visible change. Later that day, he finally saw her. She was sitting in her usual place, calm as ever. As if nothing had happened. As if her name being on that list meant nothing. That bothered him more than the surprise itself. If he had been in her position, unexpectedly selected, he would have shown something. At least some reaction. But she didn't. He walked over, not even fully aware of why. You're on the list, he said. She looked up at him, her expression soft. Yes, she replied simply. That was it. No explanation. No excitement. No attempt to justify it. He frowned slightly. What are you even going to do? He asked. His tone wasn't aggressive, but there was doubt in it. Clear, unhidden doubt. She paused for a moment. Then she said, I'll play. Play what? He asked. The piano. The answer was calm, natural, like she was stating something obvious. But to him, it sounded completely unexpected. He blinked. The piano? He repeated. She nodded. He almost laughed. Not in a loud way, but in disbelief. You play? He asked. She didn't react to the surprise in his voice. Yes, she said. That single word carried no need for approval. No need to prove anything. Just a simple truth. But to him, it raised more questions than answers. Since when? How? Why had no one ever heard about this? Why had she never mentioned it? It didn't match anything he thought he knew about her. And instead of accepting that maybe he didn't know her at all, he doubted her. You know this is a proper event, right? He said. Not just something casual. She looked at him, not offended, not defensive. I know, she said quietly. Her calmness made it harder for him to push further. So he didn't, but the doubt stayed, strong, unshaken. As days went by, preparations began. Participants started practicing, discussing their performances, making plans. He focused on his own part, confident as always. But in the back of his mind, there was a question he couldn't ignore. What would her performance be like? He tried to imagine it, but every version in his mind felt incomplete, because he had never seen her do anything that could prepare him for it. Meanwhile, she continued her routine. Nothing about her behavior changed. She didn't suddenly seek attention. She didn't talk about her performance. She didn't try to show anyone what she could do. She simply practiced quietly, privately, away from everyone. The same way she always had. But this time there was a difference. A quiet sense of purpose. She knew this moment mattered. Not because people would finally see her, but because she would finally share something she had kept inside for so long. Back at school, people kept talking. Some were curious. Some were doubtful. Some didn't think much of it at all. He remained somewhere in between. Curious, but still unconvinced. In his mind, expectations were already set. He believed he knew how this would go. He believed that when the day came, things would fall into place just as they always did. That people like him would stand out, and people like her wouldn't. He didn't say it out loud, but he believed it. Completely. What he didn't realize was that this time, he was completely wrong. And the moment that would prove it was getting closer with every passing day. The day of the event arrived more quickly than anyone expected. What had once felt like a distant plan was now real, right in front of them. The space had been prepared carefully. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, lights adjusted, and a small stage stood at the front, waiting. There was a quiet excitement in the air. People spoke in softer voices than usual, as if the moment demanded a different kind of respect. Even those who weren't performing seemed more attentive, more aware. He arrived early, not out of nervousness but out of habit. He liked being prepared. He liked knowing what was happening around him. It gave him a sense of control. He looked around the room, taking everything in, the stage, the setup, the growing crowd. This was his kind of environment. He felt comfortable, confident, certain. Other participants started arriving too. Some looked nervous, others excited. A few were quietly rehearsing their lines or going over their performances in their heads. He noticed all of it. But he was waiting for one person. Not because he believed in her performance, but because he was curious. Because something about this situation still didn't make sense to him. Then he saw her. She walked in quietly, just like she always did. No rush, no unnecessary movement, no attempt to draw attention. She carried herself the same way she always had. Calm, steady, unnoticed. If someone didn't know she was performing, they wouldn't have guessed. He watched her for a moment. There was no sign of nervousness on her face. No visible excitement either. Just a quiet focus that made him uneasy in a way he couldn't explain. Most people showed something before going on stage, some kind of emotion, some kind of tension. But she didn't. It was as if she had already accepted the moment. As if she wasn't trying to prove anything at all. The event began. One by one, participants were called. Some gave speeches. Some performed small acts. Some did well, others struggled a bit. The audience reacted politely. Applause, smiles, occasional whispers. Everything went as expected. When his turn came, he walked onto the stage with confidence. This was familiar ground. He spoke clearly, moved naturally, and held the audience's attention. People listened just like they always did. There were nods, a few impressed looks, and a strong round of applause when he finished. He stepped down, satisfied. This was how things worked. This was what he understood. As he returned to his seat, he glanced toward where she was sitting. She hadn't moved. She simply watched, calm, observing, waiting. More performances followed. The event moved forward smoothly, and then her name was called. For a brief moment, the room shifted. It wasn't loud or obvious, but there was a change, a kind of quiet curiosity. Some people straightened in their seats. Others exchanged quick looks. The same thought seemed to pass through many minds at once. What would she do? She stood up slowly. No rush, no hesitation. She walked toward the stage with steady steps. Each step was simple, but there was something about the way she carried herself that felt different from before. Not louder, not more dramatic, just certain. He watched closely, more closely than he had ever watched her before. She reached the stage and sat down at the piano. The instrument had been placed slightly to the side, almost as if it wasn't meant to be the main focus. But in that moment it became exactly that. The room grew quieter. Not completely silent, but quieter than before. People were waiting. Some were curious. Some were doubtful. Some didn't expect much at all. He leaned back slightly, arms crossed, his expression neutral. In his mind, this was the moment where everything would become clear. Either she would surprise everyone, or she would confirm what he had believed all along. She adjusted her position slightly, placed her hands gently on the keys, paused, just for a second. That pause felt longer than it was, like the room itself was holding its breath. Then, she began. The first notes were soft, so soft that they almost blended into the silence. But they were clear, precise, intentional. The sound didn't feel uncertain. It didn't feel like someone testing the keys. It felt controlled, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. A few people leaned forward slightly, not out of excitement, but out of interest. Something about the way she played didn't match their expectations. The melody began to grow, slowly, naturally. Her fingers moved across the keys with ease. Not forced, not rushed, not hesitant. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of nervousness, only flow. He shifted in his seat, just slightly. Something didn't feel right, or maybe something felt too right. He watched her hands. They didn't look like the hands of someone inexperienced. They moved with confidence, with familiarity, with a kind of quiet strength. The music changed, deepened. What started as something soft and simple began to carry emotion, real emotion, not exaggerated, not for show, but something that felt honest. The room grew still, conversations stopped, small movements faded. Even those who hadn't been paying much attention before were now focused. Completely. She wasn't just playing notes. She was telling something. Something that didn't need words. Something that reached people without asking for permission. He felt it. Even if he didn't want to admit it yet. His posture changed. His attention sharpened. The confidence he had been holding onto began to loosen. Just a little. The music continued to build. Her hands moved faster now but still controlled. Every note had purpose. Every transition felt natural. Nothing was random. Nothing was uncertain. It was as if she had been doing this for years. As if this was where she truly belonged. The quiet girl, the one no one noticed, was now holding the entire room without saying a single word. He stared at the stage, unable to look away, because what he was seeing didn't match anything he believed. And yet, it was happening right in front of him. The melody rose, then softened, then rose again, carried something powerful, something that made people feel without understanding why. A few in the audience sat completely still. Others leaned forward. Some simply watched, eyes fixed on her, as if afraid to miss even a second. He felt something unfamiliar. Not doubt, not confusion, something deeper. A realization that was slowly forming, but not fully clear yet, because the performance wasn't over. And something told him, the most powerful part was still to come. The music didn't stop where people expected it to. Instead of slowing down into a simple ending, it grew stronger. The sound filled the room in a way no one had prepared for. What started as something gentle had now become something powerful, almost overwhelming, but still controlled, still precise. Her hands moved faster across the keys, but there was no panic in it. No rush. Every movement felt intentional, like she knew exactly where each note belonged. The audience was no longer just watching. They were listening, really listening, the kind of listening where people forget everything else around them. Even the smallest sounds in the room had disappeared. No shifting chairs, no whispers, no restless movement. Just the music. And her. He sat completely still. The confidence he had earlier was gone now. Not replaced by fear, but by something he wasn't used to feeling. He was unsure. Not about the performance, but about himself. Because everything he believed about her was slowly falling apart, note by note. He had been so certain, so sure that he understood people, that he could read them easily, that quiet meant ordinary. But the person sitting on that stage, she was anything but ordinary. The music changed again. It softened suddenly, almost like a deep breath after something intense. The shift caught everyone off guard. It felt personal now, closer. As if the music wasn't just filling the room, but reaching into each person individually. Her movements slowed, but the emotion didn't fade. If anything, it became stronger. There was something in the way she played that felt honest. Not performed. Not exaggerated. Just real. And that made it impossible to ignore. A few people in the audience looked at each other briefly, not to talk, but to silently ask the same question. Where had this come from? How had no one known? He swallowed quietly, his eyes still fixed on her. Now he wasn't just watching. He was trying to understand. Trying to find some explanation that made sense. But there wasn't one. Because the truth was simple. He had never really looked at her before. Not properly. Not deeply. He had seen what was easy to see, and ignored everything else. And now, everything he ignored was standing right in front of him. Clear. Unavoidable. The music began to rise again. But this time it felt different. It wasn't just strong, it was confident. Not the kind of confidence he was used to. Not loud. Not demanding attention. But steady. Unshakable. The kind that doesn't need approval. Her posture remained calm. Her expression focused. There was no sign that she was performing for anyone. Felt like she was simply being herself. And for the first time, everyone else was being allowed to see it. The final section approached. You could feel it. Not because of something obvious, but because of the way the music was building. Carried weight now. A sense of closure. A sense that everything was coming together. The audience leaned in without realizing it. Even those who didn't understand music could feel it. Something important was about to happen. He sat forward slightly. His arms, once crossed in quiet judgment, now rested loosely. His focus was complete. No distractions. No assumptions left. Just attention. Pure attention. Her hands moved with more intensity now. Not chaotic. Not uncontrolled. But full of energy. Every note landed with purpose. Every movement told a part of something bigger. And then, the final notes came. Clear. Strong. Certain. They didn't rush. They didn't fade too quickly. They held their place, filling the room one last time. And then, silence. Complete silence. For a moment no one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the room needed time to process what had just happened. The kind of silence that isn't empty but full. Full of everything people just felt. He blinked slowly, still staring at the stage. Still trying to catch up with what he had just experienced. Because it wasn't just a performance. It was something else. Something that didn't fit into his usual understanding. Then suddenly, applause. Loud. Immediate. Uncontrolled. It didn't start slowly. It didn't build gradually. Came all at once. People stood up without thinking. Clapping harder than they had for anyone else that day. Some were smiling. Some looked genuinely surprised. Some simply kept clapping, as if they didn't know how else to react. The room had changed. Completely. She sat there for a brief moment after finishing. Not soaking in the applause. Not reacting dramatically. Just still. Then she slowly stood up. Gave a small, polite acknowledgement. And stepped away from the piano. The same way she had walked in. Calm. Simple. Unchanged. As if none of this had altered who she was. But everything else had changed. Especially for him. He didn't clap right away. Not because he didn't want to, but because he was still processing. Still trying to accept something his mind hadn't been ready for. Then slowly he joined in. Not out of habit. Not because others were doing it. But because now he understood. At least he was starting to. As the applause continued, he looked around. Everyone else had seen it too. Everyone else had felt it. The same people who hadn't expected anything from her were now the ones reacting the most. The same people who barely noticed her before were now fully aware. And he felt something heavier than surprise. Regret. Not loud. Not overwhelming. But clear. Because he realized something simple. She had always been this way. She hadn't changed. He just never took the time to see it. The applause slowly settled. The event continued. Other performances followed. But something was different now. The energy had shifted. Because after what she had done, everything else felt quieter. Less unexpected. People still watched. Still clapped. But a part of their attention remained with what they had just witnessed. He tried to focus on what came next. But his thoughts kept going back. Back to the moment she touched the keys. Back to the way the room had fallen silent. Back to the way everything he believed had quietly fallen apart. For the first time, he didn't feel like the one who understood everything. For the first time, he felt like he had missed something important. And now he couldn't ignore it anymore. Because what he had seen wasn't just talent. It was something deeper. Something real. Something he had underestimated. And that realization stayed with him. Long after the music had ended. The event ended, but the feeling didn't. People slowly began to leave their seats, forming small groups, talking in low voices. Most conversations circled back to the same moment, the piano performance. Some tried to describe it. Others simply shook their heads as if words weren't enough. He stayed where he was for a while. Not because he had nowhere to go, but because he wasn't ready to move on just yet. Everything felt slightly different now. The room looked the same. The stage was still there. The chairs hadn't moved. But something had shifted inside him. For the first time, he felt quiet in a way he wasn't used to. Not the kind of quiet that comes from having nothing to say. but the kind that comes when you realize you were wrong. He stood up slowly, his eyes moving across the room. People were smiling, still talking about her, about how unexpected it was, about how powerful it felt, about how no one saw it coming. He heard all of it, and each sentence reminded him of the same thing. He hadn't seen it coming either, not even close. He walked toward the exit, but stopped halfway. She was standing near the side, away from the crowd, just like always, not surrounded by attention, not trying to hold on to the moment, just there, calm, the same as before. It almost didn't make sense. After everything that had just happened, he expected something different. Some sign that she knew what she had done. Some reaction to the impact she had just made. But she stood there like it was just another day. That made it harder for him to approach her. Not because he was afraid of her, but because he wasn't sure what to say. He had never been in this position before. He was used to being certain, used to speaking without hesitation. But now words didn't come as easily. Still, he walked toward her, step by step, until he was standing close enough for her to notice. She looked at him, her expression the same as always, calm, open, without judgment. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he finally said, "That was really good." It sounded simple, too simple, but it was honest. She gave a small smile. "Thank you," she said. No pride, no attempt to make the moment bigger, just appreciation. He nodded slightly, then looked away for a second before speaking again. "I didn't know you could play like that." She didn't seem surprised by that. "I never talked about it," she replied. Her answer was straightforward. No blame, no hidden meaning, just truth. He took a quiet breath. "I guess I just assumed," he started, then stopped, because finishing that sentence would mean admitting something he wasn't used to admitting. She waited, not pushing, not filling the silence, just giving him space. "I thought you were different," he said finally. It wasn't the best way to explain it, but it was the closest he could get. She tilted her head slightly, not confused, just listening. "Different how?" she asked. He hesitated again, then said, "Like you didn't really do much." As soon as the words left his mouth, he felt how wrong they sounded, but he didn't take them back, because that was the truth of what he had believed. She didn't react negatively. She didn't get offended. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she gave a small, understanding nod. "A lot of people think that," she said. Her voice wasn't sad. It wasn't bitter. It was calm, accepting, and that made it even harder for him to stand there, because she wasn't blaming him, which meant he had to face it himself. "I was wrong," he said quietly. The words felt unfamiliar, but they were real. She looked at him for a moment, then said, "It's okay," and she meant it. There was no tension in her voice, no hidden frustration, just a simple acknowledgement. He frowned slightly. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked. "You could have corrected me, or anyone else." She paused before answering. "I didn't feel the need to," she said. That answer stayed with him, because it was something he had never considered. He had always believed that if people misunderstood you, you had to correct them. You had to prove yourself, show them they were wrong. But she hadn't done that, not because she couldn't, but because she chose not to. "I just waited," she continued, "for the right moment." He let those words settle. The right moment, not every moment, not every chance, just the one that mattered. And when it came, she didn't hesitate. He looked at her differently now, not as the quiet girl he had underestimated, but as someone who understood something he didn't, something deeper. "You weren't nervous?" he asked. She smiled slightly. "I was," she admitted, "but not about what people would think." That answer surprised him. "Then what?" he asked. "About playing it the way I wanted," she said. "Not perfectly, just honestly." He nodded slowly. That made sense. More than anything else had. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. But this silence felt different. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't empty. It was comfortable. Then he said something he hadn't planned. You changed something today. She looked at him, waiting. Not just for everyone else, he added. For me too. She didn't respond right away. Then she said, maybe you just saw something that was already there. He let out a quiet breath. Maybe she was right. Maybe nothing had changed about her at all. Only his understanding had. And that made all the difference. People continued walking past them, still talking, still replaying the performance in their minds. But in that small space, the moment felt still, clear, real. I won't make that mistake again, he said. She didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. People aren't always what they show on the surface, he continued. And sometimes, that's not because they don't have anything. She nodded. Sometimes they just don't need to show it all the time, she said. He smiled slightly, for the first time not out of confidence, but out of understanding. Yeah, he said. They stood there for a moment longer. Then she gave a small nod and stepped away. Not dramatically, not like someone leaving a big moment behind, just simply moving forward, the same way she always had. He watched her go, but this time, he didn't see someone quiet. He didn't see someone ordinary. He saw someone strong in a way he had never understood before. And more importantly, he saw how wrong he had been, not in a way that made him feel small, but in a way that made him think, grow, change. The noise of the event faded behind him as he finally walked out. But the lesson stayed, clear, unshaken, and impossible to ignore, because sometimes the people you overlook the most are the ones who have the most to show. They just wait for the moment when it truly matters. And when that moment comes, they don't just prove others wrong. They reveal who they've been all along.